amigos. Me llamo is Eric. Puesto Eric, sometimes common in old Mexico. They call me that because I'm the Puesto de Taquiendo de Famioso Peopleoples. Now, what we need in here is something exciting. Something that'll knock your socks off so far off of your feet that they'll never again be on your feet. You'll have completely lost the capacity to even have socks on your feet. That's how knocked off your socks are going to be by this live streamaganza. What you might call a live streamaganza of wonderment would be a good way to put it. Or the greatest experience of your life. That would be another good way to put it. Oh yeah, now I'm looking suave. Somebody's looking Rico Suave. And let me tell you who it's not. It's not Rico Suave. Who is it? It's me. I'm looking suave. Botoned Rugley. I think I said he was dumb. Not stupid. But, just personal opinion. Not the sort of claim one can substantiate or not really. I mean, I could narrow it down a little bit more, maybe. Like, aesthetically, he makes really poor choices. So, that's a form of dumbness. There's a gap between expectations and realities that I think he's fighting against. And, it's the prime directive when a person's expectations don't match their realities. They, they experience varying degrees of crisis, The thing is about the world, it's even people that behave very badly, and certainly he behaved very badly, are almost certainly not wanting to behave that way. Hi, Luis Gonzalez. Is that Louis Gonzalez from Baldwin Park? So, we're all dumb about different kinds of things, right? But, Kitty, no, don't step on that. No, Kitty, no. Kitty, get off. But I guess what I was referring to specifically when I made that comment is like the last experience I had with him prior to his new video was one in which he came to my live stream in an attempt to attack me, and then I just hurled truth after truth after truth at him, and then at the end, he's like, "You just spent this whole time attacking me," and I'm like, "You came here specifically to attack me, and if you didn't like what I was saying, you know how to close a tab, right?" So the thing is, under no circumstances was I going to be talking about him if somebody else hadn't brought him up, right? Namely himself brought him up. So there's probably a decent chance that, that's what's happening currently as well. But it's like he aspires to this sort of prankster archetype, but he's got the archetype wrong and he's trying to execute it wrong. And like that kind of archetype requires a really nuanced kind of FE that really understands aesthetics well. And that's just not the case there, Comedy is incredibly difficult. It's possibly the hardest thing to do. And generally, it just kind of has to come out of nowhere. You can't really force it. But it's pretty important that people who aren't good at doing comedy don't do comedy, because it's so painful when it's bad. It's like if maybe I'm not doing a good job of podcasting right now, let's say, just talking about subjects and stuff. Okay, well, that might be dull. It might not retain viewership, or it might even lose me a couple of subs. But what it's not going to do is make people cringe and feel awkward and uncomfortable, because bad comedy has a uniquely powerful ability to do that, among all media. Certain examples of bad music also make me go like, my ears are bleeding. But there's no more visceral and negative response to art than the negative visceral response to failed comedy, which is just, you know. So comedy is best left up to people who know what they're doing, You don't go surfing big waves when you can't even swim. It's for your own sake as well as everybody else's. But regardless, he can obviously do what he wants. I don't have any problem with the guy. He's just one episode of many, talking about famous people's history where somebody gets all mad. People do that sometimes. Being Mia was the original title of this live stream. I changed it to Expecting Something. But I've been thinking about expectations and actualities, which was the title of the previous live stream. Really more about expectations a bit. If you think about the kinds of expectations people have, well, there's expectations that you never even think about. Like, you expect there to be oxygen in the room when you wake up, when you're breathing. You expect there to be air. You don't actually expect it. Like, you're not going, oh, I'm looking forward to there being air when I wake up in the morning. But it's functioning as an underlying assumption that will be the case. And all of your thoughts and notions about the you that's going to do stuff tomorrow are predicated on that assumption, right? Because if in fact what's that sound? Oh, it's in trouble. Never mind. It was just the cat. Um, so in in a I did say he was dumb. I don't think I said he was stupid, but I did say he was dumb. What I was referring to specifically was his very ill-advised attempt to like wage YouTube war on me or something, or whatever he was trying to do. You think it's an average feeling for IHPs to think that nearly everyone is stupid or a liar or both? Um, I mean, IHPs are a little bit more cautious in their ideation than ENTPs. I think, yeah, they're going to be aware that there's an intelligence gap of some sort, particularly in terms of analysis, right? The level of analysis that NTPs conduct is much more sophisticated in general than the level of analysis of any other type. Being more sophisticated, more complex, does not necessarily make it better. It does make it more complicated, and it does make it more correct. Um, but only certain kinds of things are subject to that kind of uh, discursive approach. Or that kind of discursive approach is only appropriate for certain kinds of circumstances. So, a smart NTP is going to recognize that there's more to intelligence than just analysis, right? Abstract analysis. You want to go outside? Okay, you can go outside. There he goes, out for his day. He's gonna go spend all day doing who knows what. No, the cats don't like scratching this furniture. It's not the right kind of material for them. They scratch on the carpet, which is fine. I don't care if they do that. I don't even care if they scratched on this furniture. So, generally, people use the word intelligence to mean scholarly, depth in scholarly matters. And the thing is, NTPs are the best at sounding smart. We use the biggest words and we ask the most incisive questions. But it's like, I'm talking about what we aren't meant to function as solo creatures. We're meant to find cognitive function relationships that allow us to best optimize. So, whatever type you are, you're mostly hamstrung by being your type. You're going to need other people providing the kind of attention that you simply aren't going to be paying. Whether you can or will or won't or however you want to put it, you simply it won't be the case that you'll be paying that kind of attention effectively or sometimes at all, depending on the thing. Well, I mean, intelligence equals IQ doesn't mean anything. Intelligence quotient, IQ, is a numerical score on a test that includes multiple different kinds of reasoning. Uh, it's not measuring a discrete trait, so it's just a metaphor. Well, many people say very illogical things for either the purpose of lying or just being stupid. I mean, I think when people lie, they run a higher risk of creating contradictions. But I don't think that people create contradictions for the purpose of lying. That would seem to be backwards. I don't think people do anything for the purpose of just being stupid. I mean, people all have their strengths and their corresponding deficits that are necessarily implied by the strengths. Because a person pays attention in a given fashion a majority amount of the time that they can measure in terms of conscious attention being paid, hours, minutes, seconds. Um, it's at the expense or with the opportunity cost of not choosing the alternatives. There are exactly 16 configurations because there are four kinds of functions: deliberation, action, knowledge, and interface. And there's a communicative and an experiential version of each. So your permutations, um, they don't include all possible permutations because action and deliberation functions have to go together. For example, interface knowledge functions have to go together. So you've got your interfacers, FE DOMs and TE DOMs. You got your knowers, NI DOMs and SI DOMs. You got your actors, NE DOMs and SE DOMs. And you got your deliberators, TI DOMs and FI DOMs. In each of those instances, if you're a deliberator, your tool function is an action function. If you're an actor, your tool function is a deliberation function. Because action and deliberation go together. It's a turn-based modality of being. You decide on something, then you follow through on your course of action. But your course of action is initiated by you, determined by you, and if you get your way, involves little interface with other people or systems. In contrast, interfacers, they always want to interface with the system. They never want to figure it out ahead of time and then execute that plan. Knowers, they want to know first and then interface. Which is why ISFJs and INFJs alike, both, since they have FE, both play this kind of sounding board role and will take their time to get a read on you. It takes SI types a longer time than NI types. Is there a type that expects the worst all the time? Well, I think ESTJs use much of their extrovert intuition. Uh, they direct much of that attention that they direct from their third slot towards anticipating what could derail their plans. Um, TE Dom, they've got, they only want to do their own ideas, their own original thing, and they they want to make sure it goes off as they anticipate and plan. So they're constantly trying to imagine possible things that could go wrong and prevent them ahead of time. So as a consequence, it tends to make them very pessimistic. My dad was always pessimistic about everything. I, on the other hand, was always optimistic about everything. And we were both wrong the same amount, you know? It's like, ideally, one would have as even-handed an assessment of the future as possible. But as I mentioned in the previous live stream, it seems as though everybody has a relationship with the past, a relationship with the present, a relationship with the future. One of which they romanticize, one of which they're practical about, and one of which they fear. For me, it's the past I fear, I'm practical in the present, and I romanticize the future. I don't know if or how that links at all to cognitive functions. I don't necessarily think it does. It may, or it may link to Enneagram. You know, Enneagram and that observation about romanticizing being practical and fearing one of the past, present, and future like that. Those notions seem independently, intuitively correct without it needing to go through a cognitive function frame. Like, naturally, it makes sense that an NE-DOM who's spending so much time musing about hypothetical futures, it makes sense that such a person would tend to be optimistic about the future because that's what they're musing about when they're comfortable and being able to function fairly optimally. Right now, we got to deal with this shit. Later on, it'll be better. It was worse before, so we're making progress. That's my basic approach towards life, you know. I just want to discern between FE and TE confirmation bias, particularly fourth slot. Well, confirmation bias doesn't necessarily have anything to do with FE and T or TE, right? It's just it mostly has to do with FI over instead of TI. People who have it as their conscious deliberation function FI are more subject to confirmation bias than people who have as their conscious deliberation function TI. TI is a disinterested calculus, and FI is an interested calculus. And confirmation bias is a form of fallacy that ensues from interested calculi interfering where only disinterested calculi should travel. You know, TE doesn't really. I would not say that. Well, okay, people who are trying to justify very TE heavy programs or something, things with a lot of orders of operations and qualifying for this service and stuff like that. Those kind of things have a lot of of hoops to jump through, which I tend to think of as being a TE solution, an attempt to regulate something so that it's the same for everybody and presumably fair for everybody, and that it presumably precludes people successfully abusing the system or something. When I don't think that such parties are using confirmation bias when they're advocating in favor of such programs, and they may or may not use it in the aftermath of the implementation thereof to either explain away or reject entirely facts that show that this program failed and had net harms or something. Like confirmation bias related to FE. Well, I guess that would be, it's hard to say. Remember that FE and T are ways of paying attention. They're not ways of categorizing things like confirmation bias, really. The trouble is meeting with singles in his area. Is he on Adult Cat Finder? FE fourth slot. ISTPs are, this has nothing to do with confirmation bias, but ISTPs are, well, they tend to be the most dickish of the fourth slot FE types. They're pretty blunt, terse in their engagement with people. The other FE fourth slot is INTP. They're much more sociable and friendly and not dickish, but they're also, they tend to squirrel away with their computers and research things and read about things, and they don't necessarily like being taken out on a lot of outings and stuff or other things that friends do together. They're kind of homebodies in general. INT homebodies. But yeah, they're cool. They understand me. Oh, I guess what I like about INTPs. They understand everything I'm saying the first time I say it. If there's there's a problem, like I've explained it slightly wrong, left out a key thing that you need to understand it, or something like that, they'll catch it and they'll ask the right questions. So INTPs, well, if I'm the children of the world, they're Santa Claus determining whether I've been naughty or nice. And believe me, with an INTP jury, you do not want to be found naughty. So something like, was my joke appropriate? Well, do people laugh? There's more akin to FITE. I mean, that's not an example of confirmation bias. That's saying, that's mistaking appropriateness for funny, right? The answer to the question, was my joke funny, is, well, people laughed, so therefore yes. The answer to the question, was my joke appropriate? Well, then you have to know, when did you tell it? Well, you're at a funeral? Or was it about a whore in Tijuana, whether it's appropriate or not is so. What the example of what's going on there is the person is just simply not answering the question that was asked. I wouldn't call that confirmation bias. The asker of the question should respond by saying, well, if they laughed, then presumably your joke was funny, depending on the nature of the laughter. Some of it could be forced or what have you. But that doesn't answer the question whether my joke was appropriate, whether the joke was appropriate. So please answer the question I asked. That's what that person should say. And then all the world will live as one in peace and harmony and love, holding hands all the time. Sweaty palms, sweaty palms. Rub your sweaty palms in mine. We're holding hands all the time. It's Eric's new utopia. I call it Handholditopia, the land of great hand holding, where everybody has to hold hands all the time. That way nobody ever gets hit by a car crossing the street. Of course, nobody can drive because they have to be holding hands the whole time. And there can't be any breaks in the chain. All the people in the land have to be connected by a succession of hand holdings. Whenever they travel together someplace, they have to say, fa la 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 la. Which is and skip. That's what people who hold hands do. If you've ever checked into the documentation on it. Laws in your local jurisdiction may vary, but most places, hand holding does require a skipping and follow line component, both those two additional components to be fully legal. Oh no, my hand holding is only partially legal. I'm a skipping, but I ain't the fa la la line. Well, that's why you're going to the county jail. Your new address is County Jail, Cell 1. You can receive letters there. We even have a fax machine for you. You can receive faxes. You are not allowed to send faxes. If you send faxes, they shouldn't have any facts in them. We have a factless fax policy. All faxes must be factless. Oh yes, Mr. Trouble. What an important kitty man you are. You're a largesse. It astonishes even the proudest of humans. Even the most elevated, significant of personages cannot help but marvel at your glorious kitty fineness. It's true. Once again, Eric speaks the truth. Hooray! Hi, welcome back to Eric Speaks the Truth. What's the defining distinction between NI and TI? In a practical sense. I mean, I do know that TI is deliberation and NI is perception. Well, NI is your classic intuition. It's as simple as, somebody was definitely out front last night of our house. There are these footprints here that aren't either of our footprints. I've intuited that this evidence left behind of somebody who has come here is indicative of the fact that there was somebody there. I feel like I can know that for sure. Really, that's an example of very basic level intuition, right? It doesn't require much intuition to get that. The most important thing to note about the distinction between the two is that introverted intuition knows instantly once it does know. It's a knowledge function. The difference between knowledge and deliberation is that deliberation takes time. You have to figure it out. You have to think it through. It either takes time to deliberate logically by checking the language to make sure it's expressively clean, you know. And FI checks to make sure that what you're considering as an action is what you actually want to do. TI thinks about whether it's fair to do it, whether it's justified to do it. FI thinks about whether it's what the person really wants to do. NI is is a is a way of knowing knowing the identities of things outside of oneself in the world. Those things can be objects, they can be events, they can be um, finite or indeterminate length systems playing out too, right? You use NI at the poker table to NIFE to know that that guy over there who just bet a bunch doesn't really have it. You just know it from your NIFE. If the underlying question is, should I have told the joke, would you say the person is outsourcing FI to FE or maybe TI to TE? Well, they're asking, did I fuck up on FE grounds? That's what they're asking. Probably. Did I embarrass myself by telling that joke? They could, if they were asking instead, did I hurt Joe's feelings by telling that joke? Then their FI would be chiming in. If they say, wait, did I actually tell that joke right or did I tell it wrong? And that would be concerning yourself, attending to the joke with TI. If if telling that joke had an ulterior motive of some sort as part of your plan to get approval for your business license or something, well, then assessing how successful the joke was will give you more data to interface with your TE in terms of trying to accomplish your goal, presumably. And you can attend to it via TE. So the point is, a person asking somebody else, should I have told that joke, is almost certainly worried about how they're being perceived now. Or secondarily, they could possibly be concerned about whether they hurt someone's feelings. So it's almost certainly FE or FI that's prompting them to ask that question. They're paying attention to something in the F realm if they're asking that question, probably. But you can come up with scenarios in which they're asking it because of, say, NE considerations, NEFE, like, should I have told that joke or did I steal that from somebody and forgot that I stole that from a professional comedian? That would be like directing SINE concerns towards the matter. Do you know what I'm saying? Or do you know what I mean? We can't just start with the thing there without knowing what the scene is. Everybody pays attention in different ways. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But even so, they can't come to the exact same place. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's attentional manners from here to there. Attentional manners everywhere. And everybody loves cognitive functions. That was so beautiful. I should enter that in the beautiful song contest. Where all the world's most beautiful songs compete against each other to be declared most beautiful song. I know what you're thinking, and I don't blame you. Comedy is brutal because it's funny or it isn't, and everyone has different humor, but stand up style comedy is brutal. There's no soft landing. I mean, the thing is, sort of everyone has different humor, but shit that's genuinely hilarious, everybody finds it funny, pretty much, you know? Really genuinely hilarious jokes are hilarious. Well, they don't. An FI Dom is, sociologics calls it ignoring FE. It has to be ignoring FE. To be, have your dominant nature be understanding how you authentically feel without being influenced by what other people think at all, then you have to be ignoring what other people think about you. So they don't outsource to FE. They expect other people to, it's fifth law function, you expect other people in the world to uphold it at a passing grade level at least, or else you'll just not respect them at all. I like those people who are like laugh I'm funny and get mad. It doesn't work like that. Laugh I'm funny. Why aren't you laughing at me? My jokes are hilarious. One thing I've always had is the FI Dom comfortable being that way, or is it uncomfortable like they are aware they are causing issues socially? They're not causing issues socially, usually. Because the thing is, the reason your fifth slot, one of the reasons why your fifth slot function is how you validate the external world is because it's the function you yourself are going to validate on most of the time. You'll always pass that test. So you say, well, this is a good test for everybody because I always pass it, or almost always. When you don't pass it, when you get caught, um, like say you're a TE Dom and you get caught being illogical, contradicting yourself, you get super flustered and you're defeated. You know, when you're an NE Dom and you get caught telling a lie or failing adequately to, you know, when you're presenting something that's insightful and it's actually wrong, then there's nothing you can do. You know, you fucked up. You've tried to be, because the thing is, like as an HB, I try to be super careful about how I say everything so that I'm I'm not wrong. And since that's my dominant nature and tool function combined does that, when I do fail at that, I have no defense at it. But I almost never do fail at that. The same is true for everybody in their dominant function in their fifth. So it's also important to remember that how these things play out is impacted somewhat by whether your 1 and 5 are of the same half of the functions. So you got your experiential functions, that's FITE, SISE, and you've got your communication functions, that's NE, TI, NI, and FE. And if your first slot function is, say, TI, and your second slot function is SE, and your third slot function is NI, and your 4-slot function is FE, you're an ISTP, right? But here's the thing. Your SI 6th slot is inconsistent with your dominant, but consistent with your tool. If you look instead at ISFP, FISE, well, their 6th slot function, SI, is consistent with their 1st and 2nd slot function. So they're going to have a more comfortable relationship with their 6th slot function than will ISTPs. So ISTPs are more countervaluing of SI than ISFPs are. It also impacts other slots as well. So, like an ESTJ has got TE in the 1st slot and TI in the 5th. Those are on opposite teams. His 5th slot, an ESTJ's 5th slot function is on the opposite team of that ESTJ's dominant and tool function. So they have a much less robust relationship with their 5th slot function than, say, INFJ, whose 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th are all the same kind. Then that's maximally valuing 5th and maximally countervaluing 6th. ENTP and INFJ are in that boat, where we maximally value 5th and maximally countervalue 6th, because 6 is the other kind of function of our first 3 conscious functions. I mean, I think FI DOMs are very comfortable being who they are. They, especially like INFPs who've got both subjective epistemology functions. When they're not unhealthy, they probably know who they are better than anybody knows who they are. You know, they're the absolute experts at knowing who they are. But they have difficulty doing what intuitives normally are good at, which is they have difficulty accepting any kind of universalities as meaningfully informative about anything, because they attend by 2 subjective epistemology functions. They have inherent suspicion towards notions of the unique combination of feelings and experiences that comprise an individual ever really being meaningfully put into a box, or that that anything's ever really fully correct or incorrect, because there are always people's opinions which link to their authentic feelings and thereby lend that affirmation some sort of legitimacy in their minds, you know. But INFPs are certainly capable of compartmentalizing that and saying, okay, well, these matters here don't involve any feelings. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Whether I feel good about it or bad about it doesn't matter. Whether it makes you feel bad that 2 plus 2 equals 4, or it makes me feel bad, or it makes me feel good, you feel good, none of that matters. 2 plus 2 equals 4. We don't have to use those calculations. But very few conversations in life are about such mundanities, mundaniphanalias. Most matters in dispute are a little more complicated than that, you know? Like, who's seen Greta and why? Uh, INFP are impressive to me then in that sense. Yeah, well, they are impressive in general. INFPs have the capacity to impress, for sure, because they're smart, they're deliberators. They've got FI Dom, but they've got TI 8, which is functioning on autopilot, but it can be quite effective. Do you feel INFPs are also likely to adopt your infinite second chances policy? Um, yeah, probably, but I don't have that policy anymore. You I don't need toxic people around me. But I used to be a big believer, and in general, still am a big believer that people need to be given. It needs to be safe for people to fail. It needs to be safe for them to fail, and for them to recognize that as part of the process of accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish or getting better or whatever. You know, the reason I feel like this is an important message is because that's how I do business, right? I have a lot of trial and error. I'm very hit and miss. I've got a lot of shit made, some of which is quite great. A lot of it's very bad. A lot of it's mediocre. So come on, man. Everyone is just human. Let's forgive. Well, the point is, we have to care about the feelings of victims as well as the well-being of perpetrators, right? It's it's more than just. It certainly is relevant. Let's put it that way. That somebody who's been victimized by some criminal, for example, um, is kind of re-victimized when they get away with it. At least for some people, right? That they're going to feel as though justice was denied them. There is a retributive side to justice. It's not merely rehabilitative. The wickedness committed when you murdered that person is a wickedness that causes a great deal of harm to a great deal of people around that person who's killed. And for the perpetrator to simply convince everybody that he's really, really sorry and that he's not going to do it again, and therefore we should just let him go free, is it's it's a travesty of disproportionality. Right. Well, the point about the criminal justice system is it purports to serve a couple of different roles. One, to deter crime. Two, to rehabilitate criminals. And three, to punish criminals. Um, Hippies, as you say, don't like that last one because they've got this kind of merchant of Venice, pound of flesh understanding of punitive consequences. But the thing is, the criminal conferred horribly punitive consequences on an innocent person by violating their rights. And so justice requires that they experience punishment proportional to the harm that they willfully and criminally caused. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree here, Lamb. The courts have a lot of problems, and almost all of the problems of the courts can be traced back to plea bargaining. There should not be any plea bargaining. Plea bargaining, it undermines the justice system completely. The only reason it even was permitted to exist in the first place by the Supreme Court was because the drug war created so many non-criminals engaged with the courts, engaged with the criminal courts, that they were overwhelmed. They couldn't possibly hear all those trials, you know? And why did that happen? Well, because they made something that's not a crime into a criminal concern. There's no crime in doing drugs or buying drugs or selling drugs consensually. Crimes are violations of property, person, or um, potentially crimes against the state, but even those need to be things like crimes against the state's property, right? Um, so you can't you can't commit a crime that's not against something, against the state, against that person, against that person's property. Thanks, Bobby Son. So when you create a bunch of criminal engagements with the criminal justice system involving a bunch of non-criminals who haven't committed any crime, well, then you don't have there's no possible way to process all these people and afford them due process. So they said, well, let's shortcut this by plea bargaining. So the people who are willing to say they're guilty, we can let them say that and get a reduced sentence accordingly. It didn't work out like that, of course, at all, because it's a fundamentally flawed concept from in the first place. Um, if a person is guilty of a crime, they can choose to plead guilty, and then the judge will sentence them accordingly. The prosecutor should not be involving themselves in the sentencing part of things at all, which is basically what they're doing when they're setting up plea bargaining. Or the defendant can plead not guilty and get a jury trial, and either when the state either proves him guilty or doesn't. You know, that's the only way to do criminal justice. Instead, what we have now are prosecutors who throw every charge imaginably, possibly, conceivably related to what they think you did at you and say, we're going to charge you with all of these things. If you're found guilty of for all of these things, you'll go to jail for 120 years, or you could plead guilty to this one thing and go to jail for 6 months. And because people aren't legally robust in their thinking, and it sounds really scary, they say, okay, I'll take the plea bargain. They should all go to trial because juries won't buy that shit. You know, when prosecutors overcharge people like that, juries don't like it, and juries will find that person not guilty. I was on such a jury. When we found the guy not guilty, and the prosecutor threw every charge imaginable at that guy for what was functionally simple assault. So, and every juror in the box was chomping at the bit, except for one, chomping at the bit to find this guy not guilty for whatever reason they felt like. You know, it's just like nobody wanted to convict the guy. The thing is, people get intimidated by professionals in the legal field, and it causes bad things to happen because they cede power where they should be ceding none, and they fail to take advantage of of their own angles of counterattack, you know? Like when I tried to get in touch with the Pomona City attorney after that cop pushed me, and he wouldn't return my calls until I finally left a message saying, I'm going to be at the Pomona City budget meeting on Tuesday, February 9th, to tell them how much money they are wasting on you, Mr. City Attorney, who is completely and utterly failing to do his job, having failed to return these phone calls, on an important civic matter with a substantial amount of potential liability. Then he called me back. Fucking lawyers. Lawyers, don't fuck with Eric. I don't respect you because it's mostly smoke and mirrors you're doing. Mostly smoke and mirrors and filing paperwork on time. The actuality is, things like lawsuits are almost always more trouble than they're worth. No, I agree with you, Caroline. It was never justice in the first place to put anybody in jail for weed or any other drugs. Because it's not a crime against anything. It has to be a crime against to be a crime. Like, that's why speeding tickets aren't crimes, they're infractions. You broke the rule, but you didn't commit a crime against any person, property, or state. Would you say decent metaphysical TE and poor physical TE is typical for both IMPs? There aren't really two different kinds of TE like that. TE is an interface function that translates dynamic physical systems or organizational systems into ordinalities, which is, say, language that you can communicate to others. First do this, then do that, then do the other thing, right? So there may be some people who are better at figuring out and solving the problem themselves and not so good at explaining the ordinality to others, but I don't think that would be the case if they were asked. I think anybody who TEs consciously well is going to be able to list out the ordinalities of something they figured out how to do. First plug it in, then turn it on, then make it you know. I mean, the thing is, here says, I was confused understanding where someone was coming from with forgiveness. If someone commits a crime, I can see where they're coming from if they're empowered and rob some store. Well, see, to me, that just seems like you're dehumanizing the poor. There's no reason to presume that poor people have less character than people with money. And thievery is a failure of character. It's not an action taken out of need. You might say, well, they really, really needed this time, though. Okay, well, but the world didn't start 5 seconds before they needed it. You know, they have some sort of obligation to a position where somehow magically it's literally their only option to steal stuff, right? Which is just crazy because there's all sorts of ways you can get food and or whatever for free, you know, if you're poor. People like to give poor people free stuff. It makes them feel better about themselves. Ah, there. We've infantilized these poor people some more. Wonderful. That's just what they need. Those poor people need infantilization, and black people need to have menthol cigarettes banned. So because big tobacco is targeting that poor black community. So we, smug white people, have decided to ban menthol cigarettes to protect you poor black people. Wasn't that considerate of us? Well, you know what I say. Good thing I don't smoke menthol's grunt core. Hello. You're grunting and you're removing the cores from apples simultaneously. That's why you're called grunt core. Not in California. They don't even have any cigarettes at CVS in California. They do at Walgreens and Rite Aid, but not CVS. CVS has no tobacco products because they're so health conscious as a store. Sure, they sell handles of vodka, but not cigarettes. But how crazy is this? The way that I called my doctor yesterday to refill my prescription for Adderall. And I told him the address of the CVS at Oakhurst. It was like within a few hours, it was filled and ready to be picked up. No shenanigans. Crazy, huh? A CVS in Oakhurst may be constantly very super, you know? Let's hope so. Let's cross our fingers. It's a little chilly. Not that cold. I'm getting used to the colds a little bit, I think, you know. I did spend a lot of my childhood in the Sierras. This is the west side of the Sierra Mountains. In my childhood, we used to go to the east side of the Sierra Mountains, Mammoth Lake, June Lake. But where we are now, Mariposa, is like the same line north-south as Mammoth, basically. But because you can't cross the Sierras during the winter months, Geogga Pass is closed, it would take 7 hours to drive to Mammoth from here. You know, it's just due east. We'd have to go all the way up around the Sierras and down again. I looked it up just out of curiosity today because I got my interest piqued about potentially going skiing. That's Piqued, of course. Don't be confused. I'm not talking about my widow's peak. A widow's peak is when a woman whose husband had just died is tripping balls at her husband's funeral. That's the definition of a widow's peak. Oh my God, that was such a crazy trip. Too bad my dead husband wasn't here to enjoy it with me. He lives on in spirit. He lives on in all of our hearts. Living on in my heart. Like some sort of horrible tapeworm. Let's see what the things say. I can't read them really on my phone for two reasons. One, I don't have my glasses on. But two, they disappear pretty quickly. Okay. Oops. There we go. I'm back inside and everything's better. Yeah, a little StoryCorps ripoff thing. Where just interview tourists who are extroverts and want to be on a YouTube channel. Would you say Enneagram 1 can account for atypical lack of TI speed and TI Dom? No. I wouldn't say that at all. Enneagram and cognitive functions don't really mix at all. The reason Enneagram can peacefully coexist with cognitive functions is it's a subtaxonomy of FI strategies. Yeah, I mean, I would like to maybe do that. You know, maybe that is something that we'll actually end up doing. There's a storefront or two that's empty in the downtown area. You know, I could lease it for a year, see how it works out. Meow, trouble. Meow. It's a good idea for a channel, right? You know, you're interviewing random people. Presumably, they'll share the link with their friends and family, and um, you know, I'd be perfectly happy to interview people remotely too. Of course, some interviewees are more interesting than others. Thus, some interviewers. Well, yeah, person can do the deliberation quickly and reach the answer, and then choose, for example, to double check their work and be more concerned about not being wrong than about being right. That's more likely to occur in an INTP than an ENTP. ENTPs are too quick with their intuitive leaps. We're not as clean thinkers as INTPs. I'm a pretty clean thinker, but that stems from my professional background and my particular experience and stuff. Because my job is to be the cleanest thinker. You know, not anymore really. It's not my job anymore, but it was when I was a debate coach. It's a good idea, Bobby son. I think I will. Right now we're still trying to move into this house. And Rachel and I have had some, well, just like really just this morning, but on a couple occasions, a couple little like um, tantrums, kind of, I guess you'd say. Frustrations, feeling like we got Rachel, Rachel anyway, feeling like we got sold a false bill of goods, kind of. Certainly, the home inspector should have caught multiple things that he didn't catch, and we had good reason to be mad at the home inspector. But the reality is, nothing would have changed even if the home inspector had caught all these things. We still would have tried to buy the house and fix it. It just, we would have been doing so consensually rather than, surprise, a bunch of shit's broken, you know. Anyway, the point is, we're going to get it all fixed. And then this house will be operating as it ought to be. And, and we'll have our stuff here. You know, it's like we've been without our stuff for such a long time. Um, when it came time to sell the house in Arcadia, we had to get a pod, I had to fill it up with all of our stuff. Then they came and took away everything else and staged the house. And from that point through now, we haven't had our stuff. So I don't have my guitar, I don't have my dolls. Rachel doesn't have her clothes. I don't have any of my toys. I don't have my sound card. I don't have my mics. It's well, I think I'm pretty proud of us for dealing with things as well as we've dealt with them. Not all the time. Not sometimes I'm not proud of myself and the way I acted when I was really really getting frustrated with the real estate process. But we both had unreasonable expectations coming into this. We thought as soon as we get to Mariposa, this period of flux is over. The period of flux is not over until we get this house fully fixed properly and get all our stuff moved in. Then the state of flux is over. Then we can establish a new equilibrium. And at that point, I'll be thinking more about making videos, doing things. You know, it's like where we are back here in the woods, it makes it such that you got like one outing a day, maybe. Because, well, tonight, actually, because I got Adderall, I wasn't sleeping. I went down to the Indian casino that's just outside of Course Gold. It's about an hour away from here, about an hour drive. And turns out they didn't have a poker room. There's no poker room at that casino. A lot of casinos are like that because poker's not a particularly profitable game for the casino to run. But since I had driven there, I sat down and played blackjack, and I actually won $450. I I bought in with 300 in chips, and it when I got up to $762.50, I said, you know what? I think I'm just gonna go. I don't know how this happened, but I think I'm just gonna go. I left the dealer $12.50 tip, and I took the other $750. So I made $450. I mean, playing blackjack. I don't normally like to play anything at the casino except poker, but blackjack's kind of fun too. I guess it's faster than poker. You know, poker's kind of boring. The blackjack I was playing tonight, they have this weird thing where they have these circles, and if you bet on those circles, if you have one of your two cards is the same as the dealer's top card, then that pays 3 to 1. If it's exactly the same suit and same number, it pays 12 to 1. And then they have another circle for the bottom card, the dealer's bottom card. If one of your two cards is the same as that, it pays 3 to 1. If it's the same and the same suit, then it pays 12 to 1. Well, I was like, oh, I played those ones for a little bit, and I don't like those things. They they don't hit off enough. So I'm gonna just bet regular for a while. And I bet for regular for a while, and I was like, you know what? I think maybe one of those things is gonna go. So I put a $25 chip on each one of them, and I got the same number in the same suit, so I paid 12 to 1. So that paid $300. That bet. And I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing because I never played this kind of blackjack before. I just played regular blackjack before. Um, but it was shortly after that that win that I got up to $762.50. And I say, why am I even still sitting here? I should just get up and take this money and go home, which I did. So feeling pretty good about that. And it's not like I'm going to go back to that casino very much because it doesn't have poker, and that's what I went there to play. I would have lost at poker, of course, but it would have taken a lot longer. I was only there for like 45 minutes, Okay, well, let's do outside. Come on. Yeah. Well, Bobby's son, if you want to, if you want to know, like, where I am, you should look on Google Maps for Jerseydale. Mariposa is a county. There is no town, technically. There's no city of Mariposa or town of Mariposa. It's just a census designated place where people live. So it's just county. But because it's just county, there's names for different parts of the county. Was blackjack allowed menthol cigarettes? Um, no. I don't think even the Indians can sell menthol cigarettes. What was interesting is they had smoking inside that casino. I didn't smoke in there because I don't think they had it at the table games. But it's really surprising because in California, you cannot smoke inside of anything. I've never encountered that before, Indian casino or otherwise. But this one, you could smoke at the slot machines. So I don't know. I guess they're asserting their sovereign nation status, huh? Yeah, Jerseydale is where I live. I live past the Jerseydale Forest Ranger Station, and I live about as far back as you can get from the highway. There's I'm on Snyder Ridge Road. Snyder Creek Road is the very last farthest back road, and it's the one right after the one I'm on. So it's quite a drive in and out of here back to the highway, and then Mariposa's the town is closed once I get back to the highway. Oakhurst is you know 30 minutes total, probably 35, something like that. Depending on what time of day you're driving. So it's a definite change of reality for me. I'm accustomed to being in LA where we just DoorDash shit. I want coffee right now. DoorDash it. Not anymore. So, like when I went out tonight, I knew I had to be back here before. uh, Keeping in mind, I was anticipating when I'm playing poker, which takes a lot longer than playing a little bit of blackjack and leaving. Um, there was one hand in blackjack too where because it's 8 deck blackjack, so they got 8 decks shuffled all randomly. So it might come out like 8 of spades, 8 of spades, 8 of spades, 8 of spades, like that. Well, so I got 2 sevens. I split them. I got another 7. I split them. I got another 7. I split them. So I had 4 hands, um, and I didn't bust on any of them, and the dealer busted, and so they paid me on all 4 hands. So that was pretty cool. That was fun. Splitting sevens is not necessarily a good idea, I don't think, in blackjack. I get blackjack okay. It's not that complicated or anything, but I don't play by the book exactly. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Oh yeah, we are going to be great. We already are great here. It's just that, well, this experience has run afoul of the Prime Directive somewhat, in that Rachel and I weren't anticipating the downside of the hill. Things need to be said and play by the book. Well, with blackjack, you should, though, generally speaking. But I was, I just picked it because it was a card game, and I couldn't play poker, and I'd driven all the way there, so why not play a little bit of it? Uh, like, really, if you were to play that by the book, I suspect you should never bet on those match the dealer's card bets. Because even though match the number and seed pays 12 to 1, and just match the number pays 3 to 1, you're going you're going to hit that less frequently than those payouts, right? So it's like I just went with it's been 4 or 5 hands since I've matched any of the dealer's cards. Maybe this one, and I'll put the bets there that time. Because otherwise, if you bet those circles every time, that's how you're gonna lose. They encourage you to bet those circles. Like the lady dealer who was there for a while before the dude dealer came over. I asked, "Can you explain these things to me?" And she did, and she was like, "Oh, and see if you had put that, you would have got blah, blah, blah." So it made me go, "Okay, this is probably not a good bet." Jenga. I never really played Jenga. Maybe I have once or twice, a little bit, but I've never played a full game of Jenga, I don't think. I mean, the problem with Jenga is that it always has a sad ending. There's never any happy endings in Jenga. It's the tower card of board games. And the other thing about expectations relates to the tarot. I was thinking you could frame every tarot card via expectations and probably be able to do a little bit more robust work with it accordingly. So, like, the Fool card to me represents not having any expectations, but which might seem like a good way to avoid disappointment. If I don't have any expectations, I can't be disappointed. Except that's not true because um, that's not true because expecting nothing is always wrong. Something will always happen. So that's what makes the fool the fool. The fool thinks he's going to avoid the suffering that occurs when a person's expectations and actualities diverge. He's going to avoid that suffering by not having any expectations. But not having any expectations is the same thing as expecting nothing, which is always wrong because something always happens. And if you're talking about, like, say, the Sun card, the Sun card, you expect to be able to play freely and blithely, carefreely, recklessly even, without any harms being incurred. You expect to be able to be a baby riding naked on a horse with no helmet in the blazing sun and be perfectly fine. The ultimate disciple says, "Eric, you mythical figure, don't leave after 2 minutes today, please." Okay. I won't. I won't leave after 2 minutes. Well, we were talking about Hierophant. It was like, I think of Hierophant as the king of the hoops. If you get a, like, I was doing a tarot reading for Rachel earlier where I said, okay, here's the area where your expectations and actualities are close together. Here's a card for where your expectations and actualities are not close together. Here's a card where you should have expectations but don't have any. Here's a card where what others expect of you correctly, and here's a card what others expect of you incorrectly. So then you can interpret all those things there. Thank you for your service, so Derek, I'll be bouncing. You can bounce, bounce, bounce all the way downtown to the bouncing place where you bounce all around. Go ahead now. Schlong's bouncing. He's bouncing like a super ball. Super balls are among the bounciest of all balls. My balls are always bouncing from the left and to the right. Some of the lyrics of a classic AC/DC song called I've Got Big Balls. Mac Daddy, good morning to you too. You know what? I'm going to up that. I want you to have a very good morning. That's one step above good. Very good. I'm saving my very good for the afternoon. I'm going to have a good morning and I'm going to have a very good afternoon. Then I'm going to have a mediocre evening. But then I'm going to have a good night. That's my plan for the day. Mine is AUM. Supposedly the first vibration that started the universe, the Big Bang. The Great Roar in the Hindu tradition. What's AUM? Om. I mean like Om. Well, where did the roar come from to start the Big Bang? Was it a lion? Do you think it was a lion? Or maybe it was a leaf blower. I think the first sound in the universe that ever was heard was the sound of a leaf blower. Because right after the Big Bang happened, the main central parts of the Big Bang got together and hired some Mexicans to blow away the leaves. And we've been tortured by leaf blowers ever since. It's also 368, 369. The next number in that series is 12. Then 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. Long, long ago, before there was anything, there was a giant lion named Stephen. He floated around in nothingness. It wasn't even outer space because it was just nothing. It was just him being a giant lion with the name Stephen, wondering what to do. Well, one day he opened his large mouth to breathe, but this sound came out when he breathed out. He said, what was that? And he tried it again. let's see how loud I can do this. And he's like, oh, and it caused all of the stars and planets to just go right out of his butt. The universe is just Steven poop. And he's like, oh my God, I should never have eaten all that pre-existential Chinese food. I should have waited for them to instantiate it. That's what I get for consuming food that doesn't exist yet. It causes a rumbling in my stomach. Anyway, he went on to marry a Swedish woman and had a brief career on the Swedish national volleyball team before finally retiring to the savannah in Africa and raising a pack of 7 half lion, half Swedish human babies. They were known as the politest gazelle killers among all the lions. They also liked to invite poachers to come live with them. What do you know about Eastern philosophy and spirituality, brah? Everything, brah. I know everything about it. It's like, oh my God, I'm one with the universe. I am enlightened. Everybody look at me. I see so clearly now the truth behind the veil of lies that shadows your eyes, because I'm enlightened. I've achieved enlightenment. The Dalai Lama said I could be the new Dalai Lama, because I was so much more enlightened than he was. And I had to agree with him. He was right. So I kicked him out of the temple, I put on one of those red robes, and I made this ball. And everyone's just like, yeah, man, yeah, rock that shit. They were dancing, they were doing all kinds of drugs. I was just rolling around this bowl. Finally, it got so loud it knocked the whole temple down, killing everybody but me. That's when I returned here to the United States to resume my life as a regular person. Gave up the title. I gave up the title of Dalai Lama. I'm no longer Dalai Lama. I'm now known as ex-Dalai Lama or former Dalai Lama. You know, it's like I kept telling people to fast, but instead of hurrying up, they just stopped eating. So there were a lot of starvation deaths, but it's not my fault. I didn't say stop eating. I said hurry up, fast. Because, you know, they were carrying my groceries in at the time in their car. The Dalai Lama doesn't have to carry his own groceries. He's way too important for that. And, you know, even as an ex-Dalai Lama, I get a secret service that hangs around me all the time. You never see them because they're so good at camouflaging themselves and hiding. But should any heathen attempt to jihad me or something, well, they'll pop out of the shadows and save my life. What if we are immortal pretending to be mortal? Well, I don't know about my own mortality. I'm yet to be convinced I'm mortal. But I do know that my dad was mortal, and so was my mom. I know that because they're both dead now. But, you know, they weren't as clever as me. I'm planning to outsmart this whole death thing. I'm not sure how yet, but probably it'll involve a lot of bong rips. There'll be this new discovery when I'm like 80 years old. that if people who are in their 80s start doing meth, that they actually regain their youthful vigor and vitality. And everyone will be shocked. They'll be like, really? Yes. Ever since COVID, one of the side effects of COVID is that it returns virility and vigor to octogenarians. Meth does. Uploading your consciousness to a robot is impossible. The consciousness is in is a un is a comprehensively entangled combination of physical and metaphysical aspects. You can't pay attention without without having a body. Well, the question of would I comes after the question of is it even possible? And the answer is no, it's not possible because I am both my physical and metaphysical self. Half of that, if I get rid of the metaphysical half, I'm dead. If I get rid of the physical half, I'm dead. Well, the problem with that is if it were possible, then we'd have to accept that human beings could have no intellectual consciousness and still be themselves. And we'd have to accept that human beings could have no physical being and still be themselves. That's not possible because definitionally we are a combo pack of physicalities and metaphysicalities. Good morning, Acacia. So the reason, let me put it this way. The reason I would say no, I wouldn't consider uploading my consciousness is because I wouldn't believe that I would retain my own sense of identity and continue to exist accordingly. But see, there's no real separation between the two. The physical experience I have right now of reading your words and communicating with you back, it is true that we are actively paying attention in this very turn-based, abstract, symbolic way. Something that can be digitized and processed because it has that binary quality. That's the nature of using language. But for lots and lots of people, most people, in fact, the most meaningful and significant parts of themselves are experiential and not intellectual. So, I mean, would somebody like Alec, whatever his name is, who free soloed Half Dome, would he want to upload his consciousness if he could? Well, he wouldn't get to do any of the kinds of being that he does. He wouldn't be able to experience the outside. He wouldn't be able to use his muscles. He wouldn't be able to. Yeah. What's your perspective on people and the topic of changing again? You said before something that implied that they don't change much. What do you mean by this? Free solo, which means climb up it without any ropes or spikes. Well, people can grow, but they can't change. Put it that way. I'm a better version of myself than I used to be. I'm I'm becoming okay. But I'll always be me. It's not like I'm ever going to be so okay that I don't do drugs. Some people might think that if you need to do drugs to be okay, you're doing something wrong. I don't feel that way. I see it as exercising my property rights. You know, I can use my body and my mind how I want, and who but I is equipped to determine how to use your property. No, I didn't choose my type. I believe I was born this type, but I don't remember anything before about 3 years old. Um, I believe my daughter was born an ESTP. There were things that, well, yeah, but see, the thing is, that's me growing, not changing. What 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 won't ever change is that if I drink, I won't be able to drink. I won't be able to have a healthy relationship with alcohol. That will never change. So it's like, and it also never changed that I can smoke marijuana without any negative consequences. It doesn't mess up my life like alcohol did. But I've grown, so I grew in a way that allowed me to accept that truth about myself that I cannot now, nor will I ever be able to have a healthy relationship with alcohol. Why? Just because I started out as this type doesn't mean that someone or something is making decisions. That doesn't follow at all. Well, but I mean, like, look, I have sort of curly hair that was ordained prior, but it wasn't anyone's decision. All right. And if someone you cared deeply for thought the same, would you respect it, although it might affect your relationship? Thought the same about what? No, but look, every human being has a moment of conception where the sperm and the egg combine. And because they each have distinct genetic codes in them, there's a randomness factor that results in one and not another phenotype, genotypic representation that presents as a certain phenotype, right? So, so it's incorrect to say that, oh, about your body being property. Well, yeah, you own your own body necessarily definitionally because you're the only person who can own it. You can't actually sell your will to anybody else. You can agree to do certain jobs for them. You can work for people, right? But they cannot actually own your will. They either have to force you against your will or cooperate with you to attain something that's mutually beneficial. Well, no. So, Mac Daddy, here's what it would look like if I could really change. If I could really change, I could start drinking now and just have a glass of wine every couple of days, maybe. Yeah, 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 yeah. I can't do that. What I can do is learn and accept that one of the impacts of that particular drug, alcohol, on me is that it causes me invariably to make poor decisions about the consumption of that drug. So it's like I've learned who I am and that it won't change. And thus, my behavior can change. My behavior is not who I am, it's what I do. It's in a simpler, less controversial kind of example is I will never be good at drawing a picture of somebody that looks like them. I will never be able to do that. I might be able to be taught certain tricks to make it look a little bit more like them, but I just can't visualize things that well in my head. Even though I'm looking directly at it, I don't know. I have this. I'm just retarded about that. I can't draw things, The point is, some people can draw things that look like what they're drawing. They sort of accurately render what they're seeing. I cannot do that. Free will is not an illusion. The thing about free will is this. Whenever anybody talks about free will, the most important thing to remember is, what would a universe look like that had causality and didn't have free will, versus what would a universe look like that had causality and did have free will? If you can't meaningfully describe the distinction between those two universes, then you're not actually talking about anything. But the most important thing to remember about free will is actually that conditionality is the engine of free will. The fact that we can conditionally consider multiple options and then choose one, definitionally, is free will. The fact that we are creatures of habit and often will make the same choices when presented with the same stimuli, feeling a sense of ownership over our decision making that's perhaps greater than it should be afforded, I guess. But then there are other times when you consciously reference things you've learned and think, I'm not going to make that mistake again this time. I'm going to do this instead. And you're learning and making better choices, That's, if that's not free will, then what would a universe with free will look like? Keeping in mind that you have to retain causality. You have to be linear time going in one direction. And if you can't answer that question, then it's ridiculous to say that free will doesn't exist. We're equipped with all the tools to freely make choices, namely the ability to conditionally consider multiple options and to extrapolate possibly what their outcomes might look like, to make predictions and stuff. And we're afforded multiple metrics upon which to make decisions. Some people can make decisions based on what they want most. Some people make decisions based on what is most fair. Some people make decisions based on what's most effective or efficient. Some people make decisions on what's most impactful. The different cognitive functions provide different values that can be the engine behind decision making, right? So to the extent that you were going to say free will is limited, it's limited by simply the fact that we have to be one thing and not something else. So just like a vehicle, it can be a motorcycle, but then it can't also be a big rig. It has to be one or the other. It can't be some hybrid of the two, right? So what we have is a circumstance in which we've got all these different kinds of vehicles. We've got 16 different kinds of vehicles. We've got little wilderness cars, They go 25 miles an hour, but do a great job in puddles and mud and stuff. We've got Ferraris that go super fast, but have very low clearance and um, break down a lot and have bad gas mileage. You've got SUVs that hold the whole family. You've got right? You've got these different kinds of cars, and they're all traveling along the same highways, even though only some of them are designed to be driven on highways. This is the mess that we have right now with our failure to globally understand typology as the science of philosophy, basically the science of understanding reality. I have a problem when I'm trying to take an image from my mind to paper, trying to put that item on paper causing me to fight perspective because I'm just to put an impression on paper, not the object. Well, like when I start drawing pictures, I usually have no idea what I'm going to be drawing. I make a little doodle line, and then I make another thing, and I go, oh, it kind of looks like a chicken. And so this maybe is like a box behind it or something. And then people go, what's that a picture of? Is that like a boat or something? No, it's a chicken. What do you mean a boat? God. I know how to draw a chicken. Just because you can identify factors that play that just because you can explain after the fact why somebody made that choice doesn't mean they couldn't have made a different one. This is a problem that determinists have, right? Yes, you can always explain why somebody made a choice, and you can always choose to frame it through uh, causal things like the combination of his boss yelling at him at work plus this plus this plus this plus this plus this resulted mechanically without any actual autonomous human decision making to produce this outcome. You can always frame things like that. The problem is the issue of free will is just being avoided then, because the point is, but could he have made a different decision? He did make that one, and you can create link chains back to explain why and how he made it. But was it possible for him to have made a different one? And the answer is yes, it was possible, but he always is going to make one choice and not the other ones. And so it's never going to be possible to establish that it was previously possible for him to have made a different choice. To be in void would be to be not be at all. I know I am here now as a conscious sovereign individual, but I haven't always been. But that's because what I'm identifying with isn't the essence of me. Okay, so here, this next sentence here, this is what you call classify under sentences that don't mean anything. The base level of you exists and has existed permanently outside of time and space. That sentence means less than banana cheese carpet captain boat. That sentence means absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, instantiation precedes existentiality. You have to produce instances of this in order for you to substantiate the claim that it exists. You obviously can't produce instances of it because you're talking about something that exists permanently outside of time and space, as though permanence isn't a function of time, right? So, sentences that make no sense. No, that is the correct interpretation of things. Okay? You can't be permanently not impacted by time. Permanence is a measure of time. Just like my correctness is permanent, and your wrongness is too. Except you could choose to forsake it. You could choose to forsake your wrongness, and then you can depermify it. That'd be a happy occasion for you. You'd be like, hey, it's like my bar mitzvah. I'm being lifted up in a chair. People are breaking plates over my head. A wonderful time is being had by all. Time is the measurement of change. Okay. Well, we do measure change. We do measure the passage of time. Human beings measure the passage of time. That's true. It always goes one direction. Interesting, huh? What you seem to think is that measurements exist outside of human beings measuring things, which they don't and can't ever possibly. You have to have conscious sentient being to do a measurement. You can't have measurements that exist without sentience. Time is the fourth dimension. Well, I mean, time is the medium of agency. Because space is the medium of matter, and air is the medium of sound or water. So too is time the medium of agency. Agency, the capacity to act in some way that's not the capacity to the open system capacity of agency, right? Like, so ants have a limited open system capacity. You can make them follow around their own scent trails in a circle forever until they die. And they'll never figure out that they should walk out of this circle. How do I transcend time for a period of time? Can you explain that? So how long am I not being measured in time for? 15 minutes? You exist beyond the measurement of time for an hour and a half. No, it makes no sense at all. You see what I'm saying? It's contrasensible. This is the Iran-Contra affair of sensibilities. Well, I mean, certainly the passage of time is an individual experience. So, like right now, time's passing pretty fast for me. I've been streaming for 2 hours. It doesn't feel like I'm having fun. I'm enjoying myself. Time's passing quickly. When I'm not, time passes slowly. Everybody has that same kind of subjective relationship with time. You know, if you're being physically tortured, it's going to pass excruciatingly slowly. So the thing is, though, we've got these regular bodies in the heavens that allow us to encapsulate the universal side of time as well. Namely, we said we'd meet at sunset. It's sunset now. It felt like a really long day to you. It felt like a really short day to me. It doesn't matter. Sunset's the same time for both of us. So time has both the subjective component and then the objective component is purely communicative. So it's like It's to share strategies of agency, which again is the exercise of being in the medium of time. Fish gotta swim, birds gotta fly, agents gotta time. It's what makes music the greatest art form because it's the art form of time, of frequency waves, of rhythm, and is time and life are the same thing. Without life, the concept of time can't exist. Time doesn't exist at all. Nothing exists without observation first. Observation always precedes existence. Which is why, of course, plan B is never abortion, because observation always precedes existence. Or if you wanted to use more technical philosophy terms, you'd say existence supervenes on observation. Observation necessitates instantiation. You can't observe something without generating an instance of it. And instantiation necessitates existentiality. Ooh, baby, you're necessitating my existentiality so hard. I know I am. Instantiate me. Oh, instantiate me more. More? You don't want to become ubiquitous, do you? Yes, I do. Nothing makes me hotter than being ubiquitous. That's Eric's classic instantiation ubiquity joke. Most hilarious, was the most hilarious joke 10 years running, from 2002 through 2012. My little buttercup has the sweetest smile. Gee, little buttercup, won't you stay a while? Arbitrarily chosen measurements. Yeah, yeah. Arbitrarily chosen measurements. Yeah, yeah. I like to arbitrarily choose how I measure my feet and my shoes. I measure them in milliliters and megawatts. I'm measuring things how I feel like, whether it makes sense or not. Well, I would say that water makes you wet. When you touch water, you become wet. Trying to get a grasp on an NI big picture. I don't tend to make claims about NI big picture stuff because you can't really substantiate it. Even if the intuition is correct, you can't know that it's correct unless you can substantiate it. So I don't tend to make claims that involve a lot of intuitive leaps. It's like there are certain questions where the right answer is it's a holistic thing. You can't deconstruct it at all. Like, what makes this car go forward? The engine. Well, what part of the engine actually makes it go? Well, no part of the engine. All the parts working together in certain specific ways makes it go, right? That's the sort of thing where you you have to make sure you're asking the right kinds of questions and the right kinds of topics. And the biggest problem that people have in terms of like discursive style thinking is that there's a lot of conflation going on. Like, there are fallacies of conflation. The most prevalent of which is equivocation, using the same word to mean two different things. Using two different meanings of the word, and I'm trying to do logical work off of that, But there's a lot of conflation of like, you think Neapolitan ice cream most accurately describes you? Well, I mean, are you really trying to claim that you're exactly equal parts chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry? Because, you're trying to be too many things. Neoplatonism dismisses recollection, bad path taken. Well, I mean, the thing is, there are two kinds of knowing. No, I didn't say it's worthless. I'm married to an NI-DOM. It's absolutely brilliant. It's perfect. It's wonderful. But it's not good for explaining things. The thing is, INFJs will very often be right about things. INTJs as well. But if you ask them, but they don't typically make assertions about the things that they're right about, because if you ask them to justify their claim, they're unable to adequately do so because they're using their intuition. It's filling in empty gaps with intuition. It's not deconstructing in a way that's reproducible intellectually. So that's why it's bad for explaining things. Now, good NI will render an explanation concise and clear. Or another way to put that is, if an explanation is concise and clear and powerfully informative, then it's a successful creation that stands on its own as an entity because it resonates universally by NI with everybody to some extent. The weaker in the slot, the less it's going to resonate with them. It's taking years of churning for me to get the answers you have. The thing is, if I went back through all the material, I could show you all the SE led to my NI concept. But you couldn't, for sure. You absolutely could not. Because if in fact you're NIing, you're in a receiving position. You're simply waiting for the data, the right combination of data to hit you, and then you instantly know something. And usually it's right. But, in the simplest kind of NI, you see something off in the distance and you say, I think that's a person standing in the road. Oh, there's a person up there on the road. And then you drive up closer and you realize, oh, it's a trash can. So your NI was wrong, okay? You could trace it back to the SE. You say, I saw that thing in the distance, but you couldn't explain why your NI misidentified it as a person in a way that was informative at all. Except at that distance, it looked like a person to you, So the thing about NI is that it's knowledge, it's objective knowledge function. It takes what it knows from what it takes from the external world. It knows about things outside of itself. It does not know from its own personal experience. So if you're an NI DOM or an NI tool user or any NI type, you're inherently more in the moment than SI types. because you're receiving with your knowledge function data in real time and operating with a future facing focus. SI types, like me, are rarely present in the moment because we're managing our our shit in our head, like what happened earlier today, what I got to do later today. Um, oh shit, I really should go get a drink and bring it with me before I go smoke cigarettes. I'm gonna want to drink some drink out there when I do that. Blah 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 blah. SI types spend a lot of time going over shit in their head that they should probably just write down on a calendar. Like I know that this morning at 8 a.m. the heater repairman guy is coming. Friday morning the plumber is coming. We need to call the electrician again today because he probably called us back when we weren't here. And I'm keeping track of all this shit. And I go over it periodically in my head multiple times during the course of the day. It's not what one would call an intelligent way of doing things, right? But it is like it's not. It wouldn't seem to be indicated by um, by sort of a calculus of whether that's a good strategy. You probably conclude that's a bad strategy to try to repeat to yourself these things you have to do all the time. You should just write them down. Set a reminder on your phone or something, right? Um, but SI types know from their own experience. But because I'm an intuition dominant, an SI fourth slot, I take my own experience as a seed of a concept. I've noted this event interaction quality, set of words that happened or whatever, and I see it as indicative of something about cognitive functions, and then I'll explain it as such. For example, um, like I said in the earlier live stream, Rachel was trying to remember the name of Triumph the insult dog. I couldn't remember it either, but if I had remembered it at all, I would have said it's like Triumph. Okay. Um, she said champ because Triumph and champ intellectually link. But as an SI type, I would have come up with some T word because I'm not using the intellectual linkage cognitive function to know. I'm using the subjective cognitive function to know. Which is why I'm much more capable than an IDOM of making up a bunch of random shit on the fly. Because I have, instead of having to make up shit from what I'm observing in the room, which I could also do, I can make up shit that's wholly original by combining things I'm observing in real time with things from my memory that are disparate elements to create weird combinations of things. Like, here are two boots. You see them, I'm sure. I know you give hoots for things made of fur, but these two are leather, not fur at all. Though leather, I suppose, is fur from a cow. So there, I just made up a poem that was based on those boots. The SE was the trigger for the poem, seeing these boots, but the rest of it was just me digging around for words that rhyme and concepts that go together, right? That was like an NI work there. But it's NE because the NI is unconscious. I don't know. I can't tell you how I came to start with picking up the boots and how it ended up being about boots are leather and therefore not fur, and so it's okay to wear them. That's what the poem was about. I had no inkling when I started it that I was going to be about anything except boots. I just knew the word I was going to have to rhyme with was boots. And it wasn't until after I got past the second line that I decided on hoots, you know? So the thing is, when I asked Rachel, this is the best example of what NI can do and what it can't do, okay? When I asked Rachel, why is it that suicide is so different than another death, another form of death? She said, because it's about unhappiness. That's the cleanest, most concise, most spot on the money answer you can possibly get to that question. It's just lights out dynamic. And yet it doesn't say very much, right? It doesn't explain anything really. You just grok it. You go, yeah, intuitively, now I get it. It's about unhappiness. It's because this person who's chosen to end their life was, even though they were in my life, my presence there was insufficient to make them even happy enough to want to live. So, so I can explain it a little bit better than her answer, but her answer is ba-boom, It's like, that's the power of INFJs. They don't need to do very much because they know what the most important thing is. And what the most, not important, but which things genuinely matter the most. Like, Rachel pointed out this great wheelchair for my mom at a yard sale, but I'm an SI type. I was in my own head about my own things at that time. I was like, yeah, it's a fine wheelchair. Your mom already has a wheelchair. But Rachel looked troubled, and I mentioned to my dad, and he went and he bought that wheelchair, and he was super happy because it was a great wheelchair and much better than the one my mom had. Blah, blah, blah. Rachel made a huge impact just by doing that one little thing. And that happens a lot. She doesn't say or do much, but what she does or says has a huge impact. Nevertheless, that's not a good way to explain things. Which is why Carl Jung was correct about the essential core, the most important essential core idea in human history. Carl Jung and INFJ was correct about it, but he didn't explain it correctly. He was correct about the core concept in general, right? But he got lots of things wrong. And he got led astray by his NI into indefensible stuff about collective unconscious and stuff like that is just gobbledygook. It doesn't change the fact that he's probably the most important genius in history. It just demonstrates the limitations of NI. Well, everybody has some fluency in both their fourth and fifth slot functions. So ESTPs, ENFPs, ESFPs, and ESTPs, all your action types, they have fluency in both knowledge functions. They can tell you personal anecdotes from their past, use examples. They can also deal with things in terms of archetypes, Thanks, Jess Davis. Are you sure you're Jess Davis? Because you seem like more than Jess Davis. I mean, you seem like Ultimate Davis or Extreme Ultimate Davis. You consider that Extreme Ultimate Davis? The first extreme is spelled regularly. The second extreme is spelled XXX stream. And ultimate is spelled ULITM number 8. Extreme XXX extreme ultimate Davis. I find the fact that we are balanced in 4-5 and super unbalanced in 1-8 fascinating. Well, and I think I'm sorry, an ultimate disciple that we're actually more unconscious of our eighth slot function than we are of our seventh. That and I'm defining conscious here as able to recall instances of attending via that manner. It's easy for me to remember and experience again to some extent, or at least conceptualize about occasions when I had strong feelings. On the other hand, I have a great deal of difficulty knowing how I went from not doing something to doing something, why I went from not doing that thing to doing this other thing over here, how it came to be. Um, and it just sort of like, I get in this SE thing where all of a sudden I'm doing stuff, and then if anything interferes with it, I just stop doing it completely. Well, it's more effective, okay? The thing is, your eighth cell function is like your unconscious tool function. I get a lot of stuff done, despite the fact that it's my most unconscious function. I understand how I get a lot of stuff done least well. I understand my emotions even better than how I get things done. I'm so bad in terms of conscious understanding of SE that saying I'm going to do something out loud makes me less likely to do it. I try not to say what I'm going to do because when I do, I'm just constantly proving myself a liar immediately thereafter. I'll tell Rachel, okay, let's go to Jack in the Box. No, never mind. Let's order pizza. No, never mind. Let's go to Meow. And all of them reports like half an hour. And she's always like, okay, each one or whatever. And then maybe I'll forget about it entirely. And she says, are we gonna still go to eat? I'll be like, oh, I forgot about that. You know what? Let's just eat something at home. This is the horrible torture of being with Eric. Well, okay, so give me an example of SI awareness. Because what you're doing right there is using NI to describe yourself, not SI. Hey Eric, what was your Enneagram? I'm 7-8-4. Okay, well, what's an example of SI awareness for you? Because using SI means producing examples, particularist examples. If you're just talking about its usage in discourse. Okay, so that's not an example, right? That's a general label, category label, how I did things before. So this is what I'm saying. You cannot recall instances of actually attending via introverted sensing, although you obviously have at least machine code level introverted sensing. Everybody has at least machine code level every function. It's just the least conscious function. That's why you can't recall instances of attending via it. Like when I asked Rachel a long time ago, well, how's your neuropathy today? Is it getting any better? I'm operating on an SI kind of time frame where you're constantly aware of the state of your body if it's deviating from normal in some way. She said, well, on Tuesday, I did this thing I couldn't do before. And I was like, okay. That's the last time Tuesday was the last time you made note of your bodily sensations? You're not useful giving me information here at all. Anyway, I'm the same way with SE. It's like, what happened tonight? Well, I went down to Oakhurst. I got the Adderall. I didn't know whether I was going to take it tonight or wait till tomorrow morning to take it until after I got it, and then I just took two of them without really thinking about it, and then I took a third one a little bit later on. I went to go play blackjack, or I went to go play poker, but I ended up playing blackjack, and then I came back here and I was thinking I was gonna probably watch anime, and I ended up doing this instead. I took another Adderall, and the only thing I really know about the day ahead is that I have to be here at 8 a.m. for the heater repair guy to come and fix our central heating. After that, I've got various floated possibilities in my head, depending on how I feel and what Rachel wants to do, etc. Like, one possible thing I may do after the heater guy leaves is find out how long it takes to get to Zygdor. Anyway, is low FI just being super neutral on sensitive topics and seeing the world more than shades of gray than black and white? Because that's my experience with FI. I mean, FI DOMs, especially INFPs, will sustain the position that there are no good arguments that don't account for, that don't include you putting yourself in the other person's shoes. There are no good ways to talk that don't include that calculus. Okay, well, I'm not saying TE is not a talking function. TE is a figuring out function, and it's an absolute value. You have more patient TE than I have if you're an INFJ. Which is to say, like, Rachel has this app that's, the user interface is terrible, and it makes it almost, it's just so frustrating trying to find where you're looking for on this map. But she just slogs through, figures out how to move it here. Tries a lot of SE involved, right? As a replacement for TE. Try this, try that, try this, try that. And it's very important to her that the TE stuff isn't bumping into her, right? So she was much more upset about the bathtub leaking and the various problems in the house than I was. Because to me, it's like, okay, well, we got this for a steal, basically. We're going to have to put some money into it. It's been 23 years since the house was built. It's time for it to have some of the major things fixed. This is all part of the cost of doing business, etc., you know? But my bad TE has caused her to have a little meltdown on occasion, because, like, I should have realized we needed to get the pod delivered right away so we get our stuff and moved into here. Instead, we got here and I wanted to delay dealing with the pod until I knew exactly where we were going to put it. And I was imagining myself and Cameron unloading it. So anyway, order of operations went sour on this somewhat. I should have prioritized other things first than what I prioritized first. I should have taken the time to TE out the order of operations questions. Like, okay, we can't do that until we get this, because that, like, some of them are very straightforward. Like, well, we're not going to be able to do this until we get the internet. So let's get the internet first. No, I know they can leave it there as long as you like. I had it in front of the house I sold for months. For like 2 months. Yeah, neither of us have good TE, and it does cause us some problems. Mine's better than hers. I'll give you an example from this morning of how FE Tool ran afoul of my TE and caused a little conflict. Uh, so I wanted to call the heater guy yesterday in the afternoon because I knew if I called him right in the morning, the part wouldn't have arrived yet because it's supposed to arrive on Wednesday, and I just have to call back again. Whereas if I called him in the afternoon, then if the part hadn't arrived yet, I would just say, well, let's just schedule for tomorrow morning then, and I'd be able to not have to worry about waiting for the heater guy anymore or finding out about that. But Rachel jumped the gun while I was sleeping and called him like at 9 in the morning. And he told her, well, the part hasn't come here yet. And I didn't like that because it stepped on my SE. I already knew what I was going to do and why I was going to do it that way. And it annoyed me that then I had to call him back again in the afternoon because of FE third. I don't like to look foolish, you know. But the thing is, that's Rachel's TE polar absolute value objecting and saying to FE Tool, do something about this. And what does she do? She calls the guy, you know. But it's TE polar because at no point did she consider the order of operations issues. What time is the part likely to arrive? What's a reasonable time frame in which we can assume it's going to arrive? And what's going to happen if it does arrive early? He's probably going to call us, right? So, I didn't like that. But it was just because both Rachel and I needed to have a little meltdown because we didn't correctly anticipate or expect this continued state of flux continuing beyond us moving in here. It has because of my poor TE and my bad decision making in terms of what order I do shit in. It was very important that we get the pod done first. Now, but the thing is, I couldn't make that call until I knew exactly how I was going to have it done. You know, once I realized I'm going to hire a moving company people to come unload the pod into the house for me and move a couple other furnitures, then I don't have to worry about coordinating with Cameron's schedule. And I can just say, bring it on Monday, pick it up on Tuesday. We'll figure out where we're going to put it when it gets here. So I called the movers first to inform them that this was the situation. I wasn't going to be able to tell them exactly what time the pod was going to be dropped off on Monday until Sunday night. I was hoping at the time to get the pod removed the same day. I found out you cannot get it removed the same day. So now it doesn't matter if they can just come in the afternoon, even if the pod arrives in the morning, it still won't be able to get picked up till the next day anyway. So that's why this is the kind of things I don't like about TE, right? You've got to call the movers first and say, okay, here's the situation. I need to make sure I have movers on board with this uncertainty and the possibility that you'll come in the morning or in the afternoon, but I can't tell you now. I need to make sure to nail that down because I want to retain the capacity when I call pods to have them take it away the same day. I do call pods, I discover that I don't have that capacity. So what was the TE problem there? I should have researched the pods thing first. Then knowing that I couldn't do same day pickup and drop off, then I would have changed my approach with the movers. Now instead I've got this approach that I've got with the movers, and I've got to call them Sunday and say, I'll tell them the time frame when the pod's supposed to be dropped off, but I'll also mention that it won't be picked up till Tuesday, so anytime after it gets here on Monday is fine. I just don't want to leave it in the road and piss off our new neighbors for very long. You know, I just want it here and gone because I don't think they're going to be able to put it in my driveway. They may be able to, but I don't know if I even want them to. It's drive that big ass heavy truck down onto this circular driveway sounds like a good way to break the cement, you know. But um, yeah, Ruben, you are right. That is the correct order of operations. First call the movers, then the shakers, then the Quakers. And then you all get together and have a giant bowl of oatmeal. Those are the rules. Everybody has to follow them. I can see ENTPs with SI fourth being pretty reluctant to let things go. Quite to the contrary for me, Just Davis. I unfortunately have too casual an attitude towards my objects. I'm likely to throw something away just because I haven't. It's just like I don't even know why I have this thing, and then immediately thereafter have a need for it. This happens fairly often. I don't take good care of my objects. I'm not reluctant to throw them out or leave them behind or whatever. I periodically throw out little things that I just think, why do I even have this? You know, why am I saving these little clutters? You know, good management of your objects is a challenging. Can Ruben explain that? Is that a joke? You just don't have things, right? But the thing is, you need certain things. You know, you need some things, and then you need to not have things you don't need. That you got to limit the things you have to the things you actually need. Yeah, or a wife, ESFJ wife who fills the whole house up with shit. Um, well, if it's a commandment, I guess I have to obey. I think I left Ruben green because he was the first person I saw be green. I don't think that Ruben's going to be my VP. He very well may be, however, my press secretary. That's the right job for an ENFJ in a presidential administration. Press secretary. It's like Ruben said that one time. I said something. I said it's because he cares so much about your concerns or something like that. All you gotta do, Ruben, is convince people that I'm not a condescending dick. It's a bit of a tall mountain to climb. I'm not gonna lie. Best four types for president: Eric, Dale, Strauss, me. Well, Clinton was an ENFJ. He was a great president. I don't know when the last time we've had an ESTP president is. Probably probably Polk was an ESTP. ENTJ? Mm, I mean, well, if you can find one who knows how to listen and incorporate what they need to hear, and one who has the right people on their cabinet, then ENTJ could possibly do a good job. INFJ, they wouldn't be bad presidents, but FE Tool really leaves you few options. You got to find things that are universally appealing and non-divisive. INFJ president would probably be the least divisive president, but that's only one aspect of being a good president. Oh yeah, well that's why you have a cabinet, you know. It's what makes it a manageable job is that when done properly, the president is making carefully calculated and thoroughly deliberated decisions about how to execute the law of the land, the interests of the United States, foreign policy, etc. You know, the president has been wrongfully empowered with expansive executive order powers. Those need to be curtailed. Under a Strauss presidency, one of the first orders of business is to put together my team in Justice Department and then issue a clearly overreaching executive order and have my own Justice Department challenge it in court. So we get some more meaningful conscriptions on the power of the president, because the executive is the executive, not the legislature, as some presidents seem to think they are. And the president is also not the Supreme Court. What would you do about party politics or corporate lobbying? Well, party politics, what I would do is the following. I'd say, I am running for president as a Republican because only a Republican or a Democrat will be elected. I could just as easily be running as a Democrat. It doesn't matter which party I'm running as, because I'm a correctist. I am correct about each of the specific policy prescriptions to the best of my ability, to the best of anybody's ability. I have the most insight regarding how things ought to be done. And that insight has nothing to do with my party affiliation. So even though I'm running as, say, a Republican, you should not assume that in whatever ways you demonize Republicans, that I reflect those policies or those positions at all. Similarly, the other way around for Republicans and Democrats, don't assume anything about me based on my party affiliation here, because you can ask me any question you want, and I will tell you the answer to every single relevant policy matter question you ask. So occasionally that answer will be, I don't know, I need to research it more. But what you will discover is that I'm truly nonpartisan. I'm not interested in stupid, childish team versus team stuff. We're all Americans. The job of the president is to bring America together, to remind everybody that we are all Americans. We are not some of us damned liberal hippies and some of us righteous conservative meows. We aren't some of us evil fascist right wingers and some of us good compassionate liberals. We're all Americans. And that kind of nonsense discourse is divisive and is unpatriotic. If you hate Democrats, you are not being a good citizen of this country. If you hate Republicans, you are not being a good citizen of this country. If you fear corporations, you are not being a good citizen of this country. Corporations are just legal entities that function to bring prosperity to everybody. Yes, there's occasionally corporate malfeasance, but it's important to remember that there are myriad corporations, all of whom have their own interests, and all of whom can choose to lobby if they wish. Because after all, any constituent can lobby their representative. All they have to do is go to Washington, D.C., or go to their office in their local district when they're there, and the representative pretty much has to see them and listen to them. So lobbying is a healthy part of democracy. Corporate lobbying is also a healthy part of democracy. Occasionally, it produces bad shit.
that some corporations successfully get something passed that only benefits them to the detriment of other people. But that's very rare. And just because, what ends up happening is this: these anti-corporation people end up doing things like this. They insist we put in tax loopholes for producers of green energy. So oil companies begin producing green energy. And then those same parties who insisted that we give tax loopholes for green energy now call them tax subsidies for oil companies and claim that, oh my God, how can we be giving these tax subsidies to oil companies when all that we're really doing is doing what they wanted to do in the first place? Promote green energy by incentivizing it, by making money spent on that avoid being taxable, be spent before it's taxed. That's what they want. When they get what they want, then they complain that oil companies are getting tax benefits unfairly. Well, you know, the thing is, we need oil. We need energy. Energy is how human beings attain prosperity, productivity, progress, etc. The idea that we should minimize, limit, reduce energy usage is insane. The more energy we use, the faster progress, prosperity, and enlightenment of the human race occurs, right? The more successfully we are able to expend energy to do things, that links directly to progress, civilization, peace, justice, etc. What we should do, if in fact our usage of energy is creating secondary problems as unintended consequences, is we should address those secondary problems and unintended consequences better, not try to prevent them from occurring in the first place. No, Jess Davis, no, we don't. We absolutely do not. Because if we were to do what you suggest and actually arbitrarily, unilaterally set some sort of carbon emission caps in the U.S. manufacturing uh, sector, then that gap in manufacturing would be immediately picked up and filled by China and India, who would produce the same things in a more dirty fashion, creating more global pollution. This is the sort of thing people don't think about, right? But it's true. You cannot successfully handicap the American economy for climate change. I'm not talking about pollution, I'm talking about climate change, right? And think you're going to attain good results. You're going to attain worse results every single time because the richest countries and the most prosperous ones are the ones who can afford and care and do care about protecting the environment. Developing nations do not, cannot. They've got more pressing problems. And this is why I should be president, because I know this and everybody else doesn't. Like, it's how horrible is it that the U.S. learned all the wrong lessons from World War II? World War II should have taught us we should intervene when an authoritarian regime invades and conquers a peaceful neighbor, or attempts to. We should militarily intervene. We should not intervene in any sort of civil wars, right? We should not go make humanitarian efforts to protect these kind of Somalis from these kind of Somalis, or shit like that. We should not proactively prevent armed militant groups by drone striking them. Definitely not. That's called murder. That's not anything but murder. The United States President Obama murdered people. He's a murderer. It's only not murder if they are combatant and we have declared war against their nation. When Trump assassinated that Iranian general, he was a murderer. We are not at war with Iran. He didn't even shoot that missile at him on Iranian soil. He shot it on Iraqi soil. He had no legal justification for it whatsoever. It would withstand any scrutiny whatsoever. He is a murderer. Plain and simple. You have to have legal justification to kill people, or else it's murder. And the legal justifications required are laid out very, very plainly in the Constitution. Congress declares war on another nation, not on an idea like terror, not on objects like drugs, consumables like drugs. You don't declare war on poverty. You declare war on other countries who are your enemy. Otherwise, you just ruin the use of words for everybody. Anyway, under a Strauss presidency, there's zero possibility of us killing any country that we are not, anybody from in any country that we're not at war at. Which means, as president, we may kill some North Koreans. Because we are technically still at war with North Korea. I'm not saying I want to do that, plan to do that. I'm saying that would be acceptable for me to do as president. But not any other country that it would be acceptable to do that to. Unless I got Congress to declare war. You know. I could see the U.S. setting up a blockade around Taiwan and waiting for China to strike, at which point we declare war. And it wouldn't go nuclear because everybody loses if it goes nuclear. China back down. They don't deserve to be taking over Taiwan. It's unjust. It's wrong. Taiwan's great. China sucks ass. If anyone should be taking over the other one, Taiwan should be taking over China. Taiwan's the actual nationalist government that was usurped by Mao Zedong and the Communist Party. Unfortunately, Taiwan did something very stupid in the 70s. They pulled themselves out of the UN in protest to the UN letting in the PRC, which kind of fucked up their legal case. But, you know, under a Strauss administration, it will be a no bullshit zone, right? You're going to get the clear, actual policy wonk shit, straight, unfiltered, 100% of the time. You will get the truth. You will get transparency, the truth, and respect for the rule of law. You will get a president with respect for the Constitution, but also respect for flexibility. I'm not an ideologue. I'm not a libertarian ideologue who just will oppose every action by the government. But I'm also not into big government. You know, it's a proven failure time and time again. But there are gray areas where we have to apply more than one frame. You know, it's reality. It's a fair thing to complain about, because if you're really going to be claiming that you're being ethically sound, you should be consistently applying the same frame to everything that fits, right? But there are things like environmental law that isn't successfully encapsulated by constitutional law, rights framework, or other federalist things, you know? So the federal government took jurisdictional control over environmental issues beyond the scope of their powers articulated in the Constitution. And I would normally say, in every circumstance, that Congress should only do those things that are among their enumerated powers, as that's exactly what the Constitution says, right? But there are some realities that change over time that require us to take a more nuanced view of things. Um, as a resident in California, I know that California's environmental protection laws regarding catalytic converters and stuff dramatically improve the air quality. Dramatically. Like now, LA's got great air quality. It's fine. It's not smoggy at all, really. When I was a kid, it was hella smoggy. So, and I've been to China, right, where they don't have those kind of environmental protections, and the air quality is awful, even in Shanghai, which is a seaside city. So you can't drink the water; it's got heavy metals in it. It's a nightmare, right? So obviously, it's important that we protect the environment, and it's also important that we respect the rights of individual property owners. Like, if you want to see a populace that grows to hate the government very quickly, have EPA people come shut down your ranch because you've got some butterfly living on it, right? That's a bad, bad way to do things. Well, I mean, the thing is, California did something that is probably the only way you can do these kind of things. They said you can't sell your cars here unless you include this thing on it. And California was a big enough marketplace that car manufacturers said, okay, rather than stop selling cars in California, we're going to accommodate their demand. And those standards that the emissions had to meet grew stricter and stricter over time. And now California's got pretty damn great air quality, despite having, even in Los Angeles, where there's millions and millions of people, all of whom drive. So you cannot deal with the environment through a rights framework because if I burn a big pile of leaves on my backyard, the smoke might blow into my neighbor's house, right? And that's infringing on his rights. So we have to take a more nuanced approach to environmental concerns. But what it definitely doesn't mean is we don't do something stupid like arbitrarily unilaterally limit emissions for American companies, knowing that the other countries aren't going to adhere to those. We shouldn't be engaged in those kind of international treaties at all, really. We shouldn't be making agreements with other countries to give money to these people or whatever. There's no reason for the United States to abdicate its sovereignty in that fashion. You know, there. And the thing is, we need to return to the moral high ground. The biggest problem America has is it has lost the moral high ground. And civilization predicates upon morality, upon doing what's right rather than what's expedient, upon not doing what's expedient because it's not right. You know, people commit such egregious risk fallacies all the time. Well, this militant group in the Middle East hates America. Well, let's drone strike them then. I mean, the thing is, the consequences are just blowback, more hating of America, more likely that they're going to attack, and we have less justification to complain when they do, you know? That's the actual outcomes, because obviously, when you blow up people's family members, you make permanent enemies with them. Especially when they're not even soldiers on battlefields. So, you know, it's like my policy towards the Middle East has always been the same for a lot of years now. Sell everybody in the Middle East all the guns they want and no boats and no planes.
and just eliminate fundamentalist immigration. Simply only allow primarily secular-minded people into the country. Because to become a resident, a legal resident of America, is to accept and embrace the idea that the secular world has the final say on matters of justice, not the sacred world. Because claims derived from things that are sacred are always necessarily matters of interpretation. You're talking about books that are indicating how people should behave, not how a government should operate. And I didn't say they were illegal humans. I said to be a legal resident of the United States. There are people who are residing here illegally. I don't have a problem with it myself. I'm not in favor of deporting a bunch of illegal aliens at all. I don't view immigration as a problem. I think we do need to control the borders. That's part of the job of the sovereign nation, is to control its own borders. I don't really care if we let more Mexicans in, fewer Mexicans in. I do think that we should know when they enter the country. That's what it means to control the borders, you know? Now, in the Middle East, what I'm saying is sell them all the guns they want, but don't sell them boats and planes, so that if they're going to shoot each other, they can shoot each other instead of other people. They can kill their way to democracy. I mean, the good thing about pre-Enlightenment paradigms like Islam is that the barbarism implicit in it, namely the element of jihad, the idea that certain religious realities justify violence, right? Like if you were Muslim but you quit being a Muslim, then open season on you or whatever. Or if you draw a picture of Muhammad, open season on you, right? Those kind of pre-Enlightenment paradigms are vestiges of humanity's barbarism. It takes care of itself as long as you prevent it from expanding beyond where it currently is. That kind of pre-Enlightenment barbarism results in them killing each other all the time. Because if they're not encouraged to migrate to Europe, or what are called refugees going into Europe and stuff, if we don't allow that to occur, then they have to actually solve their own problems. They've got this incredibly barbaric worldview in which even Sunnis and Shiites want to kill each other because they're different kinds of Muslims, and are mortal enemies. Christianity had that period of times in its past as well. You think of Ireland, where the Northern Irish and the Southern Irish fought, and there were Catholics and Protestants. It happens, right? My point is, regardless of what religion, if it is expressed in those kind of pre-Enlightenment barbaric terms, then those individuals ascribing to that paradigm should not be permitted entrance into the country. Because after all, they're not civilized. They don't solve problems with words, they solve problems with violence. They believe what they deem to be sacred to be more important than universal human rights. They deem half of the population, all the women, to be basically chattel. Those kind of ideas
those kind of identities, because it's an ontological problem. These individuals are continually reinforcing the addiction and infusing it into their kids and stuff, right? So they're not ready to join the modern world as a general rule. Again, each individual person is an individual person. There are plenty of Muslims from Muslim countries who are actually quite secular and just have to go along with the bullshit because otherwise they'll get their hand chopped off or something, you know. And if we're going to choose to admit what one can only deem individuals from problem populations, then we're going to have to vet them individually. And we're going to have to vet them by having discrimination in which we determine whether they actually are have religion in the proper role in their life, or if it's too overbearing for them, in which case they're not going to be safe to include in our population because they don't share the fundamental core values of civilized people. Who are we to judge? America. I'm not telling them what to do in their own country. I'm telling them we shouldn't let them in. I'm telling everyone we shouldn't let them in here. Every country is to judge what they should do with their own borders. That's what it means to be a sovereign nation, is to control your borders. Yes, I'm proud to be an American. That's why I hate the fact that we are going and murdering people in the name of every American citizen. These drone strikes, it's appalling. It's unacceptable. It's shameful. I'm not telling them what to do in their country. I'm offering to sell them guns. They don't have to buy them. I'm not planning on shooting any bullets in anywhere in the Middle East. They can do that job for themselves just fine. They do it all the time. I mean, I'm proud to be an American because, if nothing else, America remains the last bastion of real free speech. We may be subject to cancel culture on social media and stuff, but the government does not censor us. We cannot get in trouble with the government for any kind of protected speech. And the only kinds of speech that aren't protected are things like calls to action, lies, defamations, libel, slander, things like that. And lies shouldn't be protected speech because obviously defaming somebody with a lie not calling drone strikes, but just drone is the killer. I mean, America is a great country for somebody who's smart, because smart people will get justice in America. There are transparent forms of accountability, like courts, science journals, used to be journalism. Those accountability forms, which is a notion I picked up from this author, David Brin, are what keep a civilization civilized. They prevent malfeasance from exploiting advantages to get away with injustice. No, but it's been determined by the Supreme Court a long time ago that there are certain kinds of speech that the government can make regulations about. Specifically, things like yelling fire in a crowded movie theater when there's no fire is illegal. You can be arrested for it. It's not protected speech because it's not true, number one. And number two, it incites a very dangerous event, namely everybody stampeding for the exits. No false speech is protected, nor should it be. The freedom of speech is a powerful way to keep tyranny at bay. You never eradicate tyranny. You just keep it at bay. It's the best you can do. There will always be people who believe to the core of their hearts that the best thing they can do is the worst thing they can possibly do. Right? I'm sure Trump has absolutely zero regrets about murdering that Iranian general. He doesn't think of it as murdering an Iranian general. He thinks he did a good job as president in eliminating one of our enemies. So, we have a serious, serious problem there, right? Americans have lost the capacity to tell the difference between murder and war. We've got murderer as president. Murderer before him was president. And I think the president before him was a murderer as well, as I believe is the current president. So we've got a serious problem, don't we? We're electing murderers as presidents. They don't become murderers until they become president, but we're electing people who are eager and willing to continue murdering people in the name of protecting the United States, as though that would ever be possible. You can't protect anything with wickedness. You just destroy the thing you're trying to protect. Well, I'm the commander-in-chief, so I can definitely put a stop to the drone strikes. There's no doubt about that. That's within my specifically enumerated powers as president. I'm the commander-in-chief of the military. When I say stop drone striking people, they have to obey me. There are other things that are a lot harder to change, but I have a good strategy for this. I plan to do most of my work in case law rather than working with the legislature. So by doing things that I shouldn't be allowed to do, and then having my own Justice Department challenge those things that I shouldn't be allowed to do, I can get case law established that conscribes the power of the president. Look, the thing is here, Lamb, everybody thinks they're right. The biggest problem is, normally when that's the case, when everybody thinks they're right, it means nobody's right. That's not the case here. Everybody thinks they're right. Eric is. I may not be the only person who's right, but I'm the only person who's a public political pundit who talks about running for president, would like to do so, would like to be president, thinks that he would be the best president, and publicly making that claim. I'm certainly the only potential candidate doing that, So, and I would win every exchange with any possible opponent because I genuinely am better qualified to be president than those people. I understand government better. I understand policymaking better. I understand ethics better. I understand morality better. I understand national sovereignty better. I understand international law better. I understand all of the necessary components of being president better than just about anybody else in America, at least better than anybody else who's trying to run. So that's why people should elect me president. It's a pretty good reason to elect somebody president because that person is genuinely so much better than all the alternatives. So much more well qualified. So much more willing to actually answer every question with a real answer instead of avoiding it to try to avoid pissing anybody off. I'm going to remind everybody, listen, Americans, fellow Americans, it is our collective time to grow up. Some of the things I'm going to say you're not going to like. They're not going to be your position on things. I want you to hire a person who's going to do the job he's supposed to do, represent all Americans and the interests of America without consideration to party affiliation, namely me. Like, do you think Democrats felt respected at all by Trump? Republicans didn't feel respected at all by Obama either, but they had less good cause, I think. I mean, Trump was just so openly, overtly, I only represent people who voted for me, and I hate everybody who didn't. That it was just, and it was like unprecedented that you'd have a president be that ignorant of his job, right? His job is to represent every American. To do his job well, he needs to explain and justify his decisions with justifications that resonate universally, not with his subjective bullshit. Because remember, we can never evaluate the wisdom of a decision by looking at the outcomes. Sometimes we make a terrible decision and end up tumbling headfirst into a pile of gold. Sometimes we make a perfect decision and some act of God, the tree falls on our car and crashes us in the middle of the road, you know? We cannot evaluate the quality of our decision making by looking to the outcomes. We have to evaluate the quality of our decision making by looking to its legitimacy, and then by being very careful in our impact calculi. We have to measure intended impacts. We have to determine the likelihood of them actually occurring, whether they will actually solve the problem, whether the problem is inherent in the status quo, or whether it'll solve itself by doing nothing. We've got to do a lot of detailed work when we're talking about impacts. We don't even need to get to the impacts issue if it doesn't resonate as legitimate in the first question, because the question of legitimacy always is going to come before the question of efficacy. It might be effective and efficient for you to kill that person, but you still shouldn't do it because it's wrong. It's illegitimate. It's immoral. It's wicked. It's murder. It doesn't matter how much you can establish positive impacts from it. Like I've tried to prove here that America is 20% less likely to be attacked because we drone striked all those people, is completely specious bullshit in the first place. But second of all, you have to include unintended and unwanted impacts that are predictable. Things like blowback, right? You have to include impacts that happen away from the center of our attention, too. Like, what's going to happen next time we try to raise a moral objection with country X over there about meow when we just did that thing? How much leverage are our investors going to have? You know, who's going to take us seriously as a hegemon if we don't respect the rule of law and human rights? Nobody should respect us as a hegemon. We should be hated accordingly, you know? So that stuff needs to stop. We need to grow up. We need to stop being children, you know, who think that because those bad guys over there burning American flags, we get to kill them. I mean, it's insane. It's the stupidest thing in the history of the world. Of course, when we do have good cause to use violence, like declare war on Russia and go fight with Ukraine, right? Again, it won't go nuclear. Mutually assured destruction has proved itself for decades and decades and decades. We have no reason to think it's going to change. It would be a proxy war, but we do it legally under the Strauss administration. He waited for Biden. Putin waited for Biden to invade Ukraine because he knew Biden was weak. Trump would have just engaged in military action without getting approval from Congress. Just decides he's the king, you know? Should we blockade around Taiwan to prevent China from controlling them? Yes, we should. And if they strike us in any way, we should declare war on them. Again, it won't go nuclear.
neither party is going to be the first person to do that, because that just opens up the floodgates for all your cities getting nuked. And we can win a conventional war against China. They won't even fight it. They'll give up on Taiwan. One of my first arguments as president will be, China, PRC, I want you to make it very clear, I'm strongly in support of your one China policy. That's why I'm in favor of Taiwan's government taking over the PRC. Therefore, you'll be one China. You know how important that is to you. Okay, PRC? Remember, you aren't the legitimate government of China. That was, I forget what his name was. Chiang Kai-shek or something? Who you overthrew to implement your Maoist paradise of squalor and shit-covered sidewalks. You know, in China, people, like, they're walking their child along, and the child has to poop, they just squat them right on the sidewalk, and they shit right on the sidewalk. It's true. I know, I lived there. What can I do to expand my attention span? I've been struggling with conversations with anyone on one subject. I see that you're really good at it. Tips. Adderall. I'm on 4 Adderalls right now. Helps keep the focus laser sharp. That's the thing. I don't want to alienate any group of people. I want to say, look, guys, I know a lot of us, the vast majority of us, feel very strongly that we're completely right about our side of the political question, and the bad guys are completely wrong about it. The fact is, each policy matter needs to be determined on its own merits, based on the circumstances, etc. Nobody should have a policy position on abortion, because the president cannot unilaterally pass law about abortion, and the president can't know what his position on a bill about abortion could be until he reads it. Right? Of course, nowadays, the president and the legislature have absolutely nothing to do with abortion. But I guarantee you, candidates will still run using the abortion issue as a wedge issue, even though the federal government cannot pass any more laws about abortion. It's been returned to the states, where, frankly, it belongs. Because it is such an issue in dispute, that means the incubators of democracy, the states, still need to determine the question each for themselves. There's yet to be any broad consensus about it. So it's natural that it be returned to the states, where it always belongs, especially since Roe v. Wade was predicated on a completely garbage legal argument, citing a right to privacy that doesn't exist. And not calling it an unnamed, heretofore unnamed right, thereby not invoking the 10th Amendment. So it was disastrously bad jurisprudence, and didn't deserve to survive even 5 minutes, let alone however many years it did. It was, on its surface, on its face, deeply flawed and lacking in good reasoning. Would you make Adderall over the counter? Well, I would do my best to gut the DEA, I do everything I could within the conscribed powers of the president to essentially neuter the DEA, make it impossible for them to do anything. Probably wouldn't be able to eliminate the agency entirely, but I could certainly, it's within the president's authority for an executive branch agency like that to sign executive orders, as long as they don't contravene existing law. So
I can add shit, add requirements, right? And I can add enough requirements that it becomes functionally impossible for them to do anything. Where's my torch? And also, there's the whole case law thing. There's a lot of shit that I want. I want the Justice Department arguing to the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court should remove this authority from the government that's not constitutional. Like the DEA, you could not have a more unconstitutional agency than the DEA. The federal government has no enumerated authority whatsoever over drugs. The FDA is also entirely unconstitutional. There should be no federal drug laws at all. All drug laws, if any, should be state laws. Now, as president, that's my position. The federal government has no appropriate jurisdiction regarding this entire matter. The states should decide it for themselves. In reality, I think all the states should decide to decriminalize and or legalize drugs. But as president, that's not my position, right? Because that's not the correct position for the president to have. The correct position for the president to have is that all drug legislation should be the dominion of the states. That the federal government has no legal jurisdiction over it, and that every attempt to pass legislation on these matters has and will forever result in catastrophic wastes of money, failures, destruction of human lives, incarceration of innocent people, etc. That it's a travesty of a wickedly entrenched group of old school power people centered around Nixon, you know, who hated the way that America was changing, becoming more individual, becoming more free. That people were challenging existing social mores and stuff. So, you know, what I think about drugs is that the federal government has no say on the matter, appropriate say on the matter, and that the Supreme Court should rule accordingly. Unless someone wants to point out to me somewhere in the enumerated powers of Congress the power to write laws about which drugs people can take, it's not in there. But you know, I'm a pragmatist ultimately. I will do what is best for America. What's best for America always is not doing illegitimate things. It's never good for America for us to be the bad guy. That's always bad for America. But I can guarantee you that I will do what's good for America, what's best for the country in every instance, even if it involves shifting frames. I'll justify why I'm shifting frames in that instance and explain that in order to be a fully realized, optimal, nuanced, ultimate supreme president, I have to not be an ideologue. I have to accept that reality is how it is. I can't rip it out and start anew. And I've got to do the things that I can get done that are going to help, and be okay with certain things I'm not going to be able to get done, even though they would help a lot. And I'm deeply, profoundly a realist. I understand that pretty words aren't going to do anything. True words are not very pretty a lot of times. And they are much more powerful than pretty words. I mean, like, what was Biden's response to Russia invading Ukraine? Was it like, "Hey, you shouldn't do that. That's not cool. We're really upset about this." It's like, those words are not going to do anything, President Biden, except just confirm to Putin that, oh, we don't have to worry about the U.S. doing anything. So, just because I'm deeply committed to the discursive legitimacy of the process of being the president doesn't mean I'm a slave to it. I recognize that the best president is pragmatic and knows not everything's going to be perfect, but is able to distinguish between better than it was and worse than it was. Cameron lives in Sierra Madre down in LA, but it's only 4.5 hours away, and I'm planning on calling and seeing if he can make it up here again sometime, maybe late next week or the week after. I want him to bring up his BB guns again, and we'll take the little car out to the woods and shoot at some pine cones or something with BB guns. He's got like a bunch of different ones. Like, he's got this one big orange one. It's like, I guess, high caliber BB gun. Yeah. It's just extra pop, I guess. He's also got the pump kind. He's got the pump kind and the CO2 kind. Do I think all drugs should be legalized? Yeah. But I think barriers to access linked to age are fine. I think it's fine to not sell drugs and alcohol to people under 18, maybe 21. I think it's a good general policy. Let their brains develop as much as possible before they start intoxicating themselves. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, all drugs are available. So it proves illegality does not eliminate drug use. And in fact, throughout the entire war on drugs, drug use rates remain steady. No matter how much militarization of the police we threw at innocent members of our communities getting loaded, it didn't stop them from doing so. It didn't during Prohibition either. And it made sure that the drugs that people do get are less reliably, or you can less reliably know what you're getting. I mean, I haven't really been ripped off by any drug dealers before, except one time. 2 times, actually. But that's a lot of years of buying drugs to only be ripped off 2 times. In neither instance, I got ripped off for very much. I got ripped off for like $40 or something. But regardless, if you have an actual drug dealer, you really probably won't get ripped off. It's when you don't have a drug dealer and you're trying to go find the part in the city where they sell this kind of drug or whatever, and somebody up on the street goes, "Hey, you want that?" That's when you get ripped off. Anyway, I guess I'm going to end this live stream now. I expect the heater guy to come shortly, and I want to let him into the house
naturally to fix the heater. Legalizing would also make you more aware about what you're taking instead of being scared of it. Well, I mean, like that's true for acid. Legalizing acid, having white market acid that told you exactly how many micrograms were in the hit would be great. Because then I'd feel a lot more comfortable taking acid if I knew exactly how strong it was going to be before I took it. That's the scary thing about acid is you get this little tab of paper and you're like, how strong is it? Oh, and then the drug dealer's like, oh, it's strong. Okay. I mean, should I take half a hit or sugar trip balls taking half a hit? Should I take a full hit? You know, I need more information on this. Ironically, the information they provide you on legal marijuana is more or less totally useless. Like they put the percentage of THC in the thing on the label, right? But this one was like 40% or something, and it's not more stony than this one, and it's also not more stony than this one, which is like 20 some percent. This one might be even more stony than that one. The white one looked really cool, had a really high number, but really wasn't that stony. So anyway, I want all of the Americans in America to know that I'm being real. You know, you may or may not, I may not always be good at communicating in ways that make people like me. I may not always be effective at bridging gaps between communities of Americans, although hopefully I will have some effectiveness of that. But what I can offer that I don't think any other politician can offer is wanting to be president for the right reason. I want to be president because the country needs me to be president. I'm only going to serve one term because I don't really want the job. But I will do it because I'm a patriotic American. And I was raised to believe that this was a country that protected its citizens' autonomy and rights, that respected the autonomy and rights of other people in other countries, that prioritized justice over expediency. And I want to see that country actively have those narratives as its values. It used to be the case that you hear all the time, you can't justify the means with the ends. You never hear anybody say that anymore. People do it all the time, constantly. It used to be broadly understood that you cannot justify the means with the ends. Nobody ever calls bullshit on it anymore. Why not? It's this the propagandizing, the improvement in the level of the propaganda has caused the country to lose part of its capacity for civil discourse. And that's what needs to be returned most of all. If the country can engage in real civil discourse, then it doesn't need me anymore. But until it can, it needs me to be president because I will model, engage in, demonstrate, explain, and behave according to those core American values that are critical to
free and healthy civilized society. Well, I tell you, living in a smallish community is so different than living in a big city because of the way that if you live in a big city, you're habituated to not making eye contact, not looking at other people, just you got your little cells of people, ones, twos, threes, fours, or whatever, and they're engaged with each other or by themselves, but nobody's trying to get in, interfere with anybody else's business because there's just too many people, right? Mariposa is the smallest county in the state in terms of population, maybe in terms of area too. I'm not sure, but and I'm having to get used to like waving at people and hi, how's it going? It's like when we were driving out to down to Dara Road, the corner here, Dara and Snyder Ridge. There's this family that has this little boy. He was outside playing basketball with his basketball hoop in his driveway, and he had on a cool ACDC shirt, and I was just talking to Rachel or thinking I was on here or whatever, and he waved to us, and I'm like, oh shit, oh hi, like you, you don't want to be that dick who doesn't wave to the neighborhood child playing basketball, Boy, those new people are real assholes. They won't even acknowledge the existence of our child. As you can hear, I'm still sick. But you know what they say. Sick people are the same as people who haven't smoked enough weed. Why is this so out of water? What? What the Huck Finn? What the heck, Tom Sawyer? Still too little water. Needs a little bit more water. There. That's more like it. Now, where's my Warchy porch? The only proper way to pull a bong rip is with Warchy porch. Let me go acquire it from outside. Well, where did I leave my... Oh, there's my Warchy porch. I found this lighter, though, out in the driveway, so that wasn't a complete loss. Okay. So now we're going to pull a bong rip. Then I'm going to say a long extended goodbye. It's going to last for hours. Then I'm going to stop screaming. better. Don't we all feel a little bit better now that we've concluded that? Okay, now I'm going to begin my long goodbye. Before we close the curtain on today's live stream, I would like to take many, many moments to wish you the fondest, the most caring, the most extravagant, stupendous, earnest, and loving goodbye a man has ever given. I'll add on to it an adieu, a bon voyage, a bonsoir, arrivederci, moshi moshi, aloha, and of course, adios. Combine all of those, and what do you get? A magical goodbye that will never be repeated again. And only you were here to experience it. That's why you get the gold medal. I love you. Goodbye.